I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Colleen Bazinski. I work at the foundation, and I just want to thank you all for joining us for our first virtual lunch bunch. We're really excited about the topic to learn more about graduate research here on campus. Stu is going to do our formal welcome. So Stu, whenever you're ready for that, I think you can go ahead and get started. And then we'll hear from the graduate students. So when the graduate students give us a little insight into their research, you can just unmute yourself and ask questions. If you're familiar with Zoom and you want to write anything in the comment section, I can ask your question for you. I hope this goes smooth. If we have any hiccups along the way, we'll get it figured out, but I really do appreciate your time. So I'm just going to hand it over to Stu whenever you're ready, Stu.
Okay, thanks, Colleen. So I'm Stuart Bennett. I'm a class of 66 at Mines, actually. And I'm the interim director of alumni engagement. We're calling this the lunch bunch, but unless all of you brought something to eat, we're probably just going to be a presentation bunch today. I want to acknowledge a couple of people. First of all, I want to thank Ruth. She's been kind of the power behind the lunch bunch concept for the last couple of years. It's Ruth Jones, and she's a member of the foundation staff. Colleen, who you just met, who has coordinated the graduate program and is now coordinating with what we're calling Lunch Bunch, at least. And then Kelly, I think you're on there too, Kelly Sporl. She's been helping with the organization of this. So I want to welcome all of you. The GRADS project, which I've been told is Graduate Research and Discovery Symposium. And it basically highlights research by the graduate students at Mines. And today we're going to be privileged to hear a summary on 3 of these. And I would encourage all of you to go to the We Are Mines website if you haven't yet. Look under the alumni tab and events, and then look for the graduate, for today's date, of course, and then graduate presentations. And there are videos of these presentations that will be a little more extensive than what they'll have a chance to give today. I would encourage you to look at it. Very interesting. I really enjoyed it, and thank all of you for doing that. Now I'd like to get out of the way and then introduce Jason Chenenko, who organized the 2021 GRADS program, and he will introduce the speakers and their topics. And Jason, if you're there, take it away.
Thanks, Stu. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Jason Chenenko. I'm a second-year master's student in the materials science program here at GRADS. I'm also the vice president-elect of graduate student government and the chairman of the 2021 GRADS planning committee. So again, the focus of the event is to highlight some of the current research projects that are currently going on at Mines. I'm sure you all know that Mines is heavily research focused. Despite our small size, our research budget is pretty comparable to many of the nation's larger institutions. And we really lead the way in terms of research, especially when it comes to a lot of fields, including earth sciences and energy and sustainability. And so last year we received over $84 million in research awards from federal and non-federal sources for over 1,500 graduate students. And one of the big milestones for all these graduate students who are all doing research is to attend a national or international conference at some point during their studies. And being able to share your research with the scientific community is a very important skill as a researcher. And the desire to hone that skill and improve our students' performance in that area is what led to the creation of GRADS. So again, it stands for Graduate Research and Discovery Symposium. It's an annual event hosted by the graduate student government that allows graduate students to showcase their research for their peers and for the greater Mines community. It began in the 1990s as an initiative to help students hone their presentation skills and sort of get a feel for larger national or international conferences they might attend, and sort of as a practice round for them. So today we use a 2-day event that features oral and poster sessions for students, and we have judges from local industry research professionals, places like the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Coors Tech, Ball Aerospace, USGS, all of which are in the area, and they come to this conference and they get to provide a lot of constructive feedback to our students, and they also judge presentations and award prizes. We also have a day devoted to various workshops and panels and a guest keynote presentation. So for example, this year we had a panel on diversity, inclusion, and access. And we also had Dr. Ralph Lorenz from Johns Hopkins give us a fantastic talk about NASA's Huygens and Dragonfly projects in the exploration of Saturn's moon, Titan. So it's a really fantastic event that we have every year. We've been trying to expand grads to include undergraduate research as well, because they make up a rather large bulk of the research that goes on at Mines as well. And eventually, our hope is to take grads and turn it from a small practice conference into more of a regional conference where we can expand to other schools in the area and get a lot of networking and have students from various institutions share their work with each other, which would be really fantastic. So this year we had COVID-19, unfortunately, but we took it as a challenge, the Grads Planning Committee. So instead of canceling the conference, we actually decided to launch our very first virtual grads. We asked participants to record video presentations to be uploaded to YouTube, some of which you may have seen leading up to this lunch bunch. And we sort of used the opportunity to try and show the world what Mine students were up to. So we reached out to institutions around the world. We used social media to get the word out. We had ads on public radio, and the result was incredible. We had the widest reaching grads ever, with over 26,000 views over the course of the 2-day event, which is fantastic. We were able to put also our roughly $10,000 food budget entirely towards cash prizes for our presenters, which really, I think, motivated people to give it their all, which was really great. So despite the unusual circumstances, it ended up being a pretty successful year for grads. And I hope that we can actually sort of incorporate some of these new aspects, sort of like Zoom conferences or online live streaming, into future conferences as we start to expand grads to the local areas. So that's a little bit of background about research at Mines in general and sort of what grads is all about. And I hope you all enjoy the presentations from some of this year's winners. Stu, do you want to introduce our first guest?
You need to unmute, Stu.
Sorry. Yeah, I was speaking in pantomime there. Our first guest today is Rosalie OBrien, and I had an opportunity to watch her video last night. It's more of a sociological research, and I thought it was very interesting. So Rosalie, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. Like Stu said, my name is Rosalie OBrien, and I'm a master's student in civil and environmental engineering. I'm graduating in August, so I'm at the very tail end of my research now. And my research is all about rethinking how to make conceptual site models for remediation projects to better include local stakeholders at the onset of a remediation project. So a conceptual site model, or CSM, is a representation of the known information about a contaminated site. They often describe how a contaminant is moving through different environmental media, and they're constantly evolving throughout a project lifecycle and updated as a project receives more and new information about contamination. A preliminary conceptual site model is the first iteration of all of those different CSMs. And they're largely hypothetical because there often isn't a lot of information available about a contaminated site when a project starts. So these preliminary conceptual site models are used to make early decisions about a project, like define project objectives or set sampling points and define different environmental testing required to understand the site better. And they're made by remediation experts, usually scientists, engineers, from their knowledge and point of view. During the early process of a remediation project, though, other local stakeholders usually aren't included at all. Local community members specifically are typically excluded from this early decision-making process, and really throughout remediation projects, they're often only included to decide the end uses for a site or provide input on tangential impacts from project activities, such as defining traffic routes. But their knowledge isn't really incorporated or seen as a key piece of data that could be used in remediation projects. even though these are actually the people who live and work in proximity to their environment on a daily basis, and they often have long-term observations that we as engineers or scientists may not have because we don't necessarily live in the area. And I actually saw that in my early research. So before I ever went to do my field work in Colombia, I wrote and then later published a literature review on remediation projects in developing countries. And one of the key problems that happens in several different remediation projects that I analyzed is that there's actually project failure due to a lack of community engagement. And what I mean by that is community members in several different projects actually pointed out specific areas of contamination and additional exposure points that weren't considered by the remediation project practitioners. But by the time they had pointed them out, the project had run out of money and time. And so when the project finished, these points of contamination and risks for the local community weren't cleaned up and nothing could be done to stop them. So that basically got me thinking that we need a new way to integrate stakeholders into the beginning of remediation project. And because preliminary conceptual site models are iterative and they're largely hypothetical at the beginning, that offers us a great opportunity to do so. So I applied this theory to an artisanal and small-scale gold mining community in Colombia in South America. For those of you who don't know, artisanal and small-scale gold mining, or ASGM, is a sector of mining that we typically don't have in many industrialized nations. It's characterized by rudimentary mining processes, often taken up as subsistence livelihoods by local families and small groups of miners. You can sort of think of it similar as to the kind of mining we had in the US in like the 1860s during the gold rush. That kind of mining is similar to artisanal mining now throughout the world. So I was specifically interested in understanding mercury contamination that results from historic mercury use during gold ore processing that can stay in the environment for a really long period of time in these communities. So during my field research in Andes, a community in Colombia, I used a combination of qualitative and quantitative social science methods. So my video goes over the qualitative methods of interviewing, but I also applied participant observation and then structured surveying as well. And the research methods were intended to build upon one another. So my early unstructured interviewing really helped inform my more formal interviews with key people that I identified in the community. And then from all of my information from my semi-structured interviews, I actually developed that to create a short structured survey to gather more data from a greater number of people who were more lower level workers within the artisanal mining community as well. And overall, we were able to develop several different conceptual site models, one of which you see in my video. I also have a few other ones from other kinds of data, and that shows the development of knowledge from a more extended period of engagement with local community members. And we were actually able to demonstrate that local miners and other community members, such as farmers, do have knowledge about mercury transport. It's not perfect and it's not quantitative, but they are able to observe really visible signs of contamination that they could then talk to us about and point to specific rivers or other contaminated soil sites that they were really concerned about. They're also able to provide us important information about the site history at all of these different artisanal mining sites, which isn't recorded anywhere. And then finally, they showcased a lot of natural ingenuity and pro-environmental behavior that would really lead to support future remediation projects in the area. So I'm happy to take any questions if we have some. That's a quick overview.
Thank you so much. I'll get it started because there was one question/comment that came up over the thread from Gary Hudeberg, and it says that this is excellent. Did you ever include locals who most often are without an effective voice?
Yeah, so that was definitely a key, something we were really trying to target, and that was one of the reasons why we delivered a structured survey. So unlike the interviews, which require people to be able to give you an extended period of time to sit down and talk with them, that usually includes more powerful individuals. So site owners, processing plant managers who have a lot of control over the site. So that's important. But the other workers who really don't have the time to spend an hour and a half in an interview is who we were trying to target with our survey. And so by doing that, I mean, for one, we were actually in the community. So we learned where people congregate in the morning before they head to work. So we would walk with them as they walk to work to deliver them this 20-minute survey that was made to be really short and really specific to the area, so that we could gather a lot of information really quickly without being disruptive. This included also learning about, different housewives who lived in near mining areas. We got to know them pretty well and could return there and ask them questions as well.
That's great. Thank you. If anybody else has a question, you can just unmute and go ahead and ask.
I'm a long-term volunteer at Butterfly Pavilion, and we do some remediation at oil and gas sites by mostly planting native plants and things like pollinator attractants and stuff. And it would be great to have some way for us to get involved in this process, get our foot in the door a little earlier, because I think sometimes we come in after the fact when everything is said and done, and then somebody says, okay, fix it, make it green again. And it would be nice to be able to be involved in the discussions in that iterative process earlier on. Any thoughts about that? Anything that you've seen that were, I know what you work in was in Colombia. Is there anything that's similar going on within the US?
I mean, definitely. So I focused on local community members in Colombia because that was the project I was on, is all about artisanal mining. But I definitely think this applies to many different projects in the US, especially in Colorado, with the proximity of oil and gas locations that we have across the state. As a local stakeholder, it can be hard to get your foot in the door without an invitation from the project practitioners, definitely. My encouragement would be to show up to places where they are. So a lot of oil and gas companies will try to do like public meetings or public forums and stuff like that. And if you introduce yourself to the people there, they might be able to point you in the right direction. This is sort of a new and challenging field for a lot of projects in a lot of different sectors, to sort of be more holistic and including a wider range of people in their early project decision making, and not just as a like last stamp PR sort of thing.
Rosalie, I'd like to ask you, as you've talked with not just the locals, but engineers that perhaps have been involved in these projects, is it because of, what would you say the reason the locals are not included? Is it ignorance on the part of the engineering staffs? Is it arrogance? Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think we're starting to push back against a history of engineering that's done a very specific way. And especially in remediation has been very focused on advancing technology, implementing cost-effective solutions. And there's a lot of moving parts happening on these projects. So it's really easy to just focus on the stuff we know and can do really well, which is a lot of technical work and quantitative information. And that quantitative information is valuable. I mean, it has to still be done on a project. You can't just get rid of all of the quantitative data collection and just go off of observations. You have to do that too. So I think part of it is also a lot of engineers aren't equipped to do this kind of interviewing engagement with stakeholders. We're not always taught how to actually do an interview, or what a survey actually looks like, or how to even write one of those questions. So getting practice with that as much as you can could really help as well. But just with so many competing moving parts, it's really easy to just overlook it or think about it too late within all of your competing interests. So if you have a framework, which is what my second paper does, actually provides a visual framework for doing this. If you are referring constantly back to a framework to work off of, then you'll constantly see these things and be like, oh, right, I need to do this sort of stakeholder engagement. I need to look at the different people I'm engaging and how to engage them.
Good. Great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have one last question from Steve. Steve, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, sorry, I was thinking we were doing by chat. Rosalie, just a quick question about how you think your approach will translate to developed countries with very established and extensive environmental bureaucracies that control the process?
Yeah. So, I mean, the EPA, for example, does have a lot of guidance on stakeholder engagement and actually encourages remediation projects to do stakeholder engagement early on. Actually, there's an old EPA document about building conceptual site models from like 1995 that actually states that stakeholder interviews could make up a preliminary conceptual site model. But it seems like that has like never been read, or nobody's really ever done it. So I think really like the regulatory agencies that are interested in pursuing remediation are open to these kinds of opportunities to do greater stakeholder engagement. And it doesn't have to necessarily, I mean, it can also change based on the different community. So in my community where I worked, interviewing and a short survey was really beneficial given the time constraints. Stakeholder groups are used in a lot of remediation projects, and that has its benefits as well as some limitations as well. So maybe combining some interviews with a stakeholder group would be more natural for remediation projects in the US or in other industrialized nations to adopt. But you know, because the preliminary conceptual site model is often so hypothetical, it gives us a really good opportunity to be innovative and to sort of think about how we're making these things early on a little bit different.
Thank you, Rosalie. I would encourage anybody that has would like to get further information to contact the presenters directly. I think that Colleen will be able to supply contact information for everybody if they want it, can't we?
After this call, I'll send an email out to everyone, and we will have a short survey asking you about your experience with this sort of virtual platform, along with the contact information and the video of today's call. So you can have all of that together, and you can follow up offline with and make better connections with the presenters today.
Thank you, Rosalie. I think just in the interest of time, we'll move on to Joseph Bourgeois, whose project was very interesting and probably pretty timely given our tunneling projects and what our research is in that area. So Joseph, are you there? And we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I'll just say real quick too, I've been involved with GSG in recent years, and the amount that I've seen grads grow even in the past 2-3 years has been pretty significant. So it's a really great event, and I'm glad that a lot of students are taking advantage of it. But yeah, with my project, it's one I'm really excited to be a part of, and it's been great working with Dr. Miller from the mining department on this particular project. So essentially what we're doing is looking to characterize high pressure water jets as an excavation tool to perform rehabilitation on concrete structural liners and underground workings such as tunnels and mine drifts. And essentially this high pressure water jet system could be used in place of traditional excavation tools like hydraulic or pneumatic impact hammers. And we're looking into this field of work because there is significant potential for an increase in rehabilitation of structural liners due to current operating trends in the mining and underground construction industries. So for example, mining companies are looking to mine at increasing depths within pre-existing operations and rehabilitate previously abandoned workings in hopes of developing new resources. And then additionally, the effective lives of subways and sewer systems and urban environments are coming to an end, which requires rehabilitation for safe continued use. So just as a quick overview, specific areas of structural liners may require rehab work due to failure of concrete or shotcrete. And this failure can come from a variety of sources such as age, in situ stresses, excessive groundwater, accidental impacts, many more. So in these situations, it's preferred that only the deteriorated concrete or shotcrete is removed rather than removing an entire section of the liner. And that's where the excavation tools will come into play, such as the impact hammers, which are traditional tools used for this type of work. However, this form of concrete removal has significant drawbacks related to health, safety, and structural integrity of the liner itself. It's a long-held belief that the percussive impacts and vibration generated by the hammer causes unintentional damage to the surrounding intact shotcrete and or concrete due to the propagation of fractures and the delamination of the liner from the rock substrate. I even currently have friends in industry who have problems with this, and I've heard stories where entire slabs of the rib have come down during impact hammer removal when they only meant to remove a specific area. So this is something we want to avoid. And you know, with our group, we're investigating the use of high pressure water jet systems as excavation tools because we want to eliminate those inherent drawbacks associated with traditional technologies. So working off of past research activities at Colorado School of Mines related to scaling and underground environments, our research looks to expand the cutting process to rehabilitation of structural liners. There are many operational advantages related to the use of water jets. Just to name a few, they have the ability to focus energy, they operate continuously, there's no direct contact between the target material and the equipment since the water is what's making contact. They're mechanically simple and they're amenable to remote robotic control. So you're able to take the person out of the equation if you use this type of technology. So really what our research is set out to do, we want to characterize the hydro excavation process through operating parameters used during excavation and the fragmentation dynamics. And during empiric testing on engineered liner panels that we built, we documented what the whole process looks like. And I don't know whether you've seen the presentation or not, there's a lot of great visuals there. So I would encourage you to go check it out. Because if you go to the presentation, there's great visuals on how the water jet excavation process looks compared to that of impact hammer excavation. And through our documentation, we highlighted key differences between excavation processes related to physical inspection, vibration data that we acquired through use of accelerometers attached to the panels during testing. And then right now, to finish up, what we're doing is analyzing potential substrate damage in a non-destructive manner using ground penetrating radar scans that we took before and after testing. So, you know, with all these processes that we're looking at, I mean, even with the vibration data alone, during impact hammer testing, we had readings of above 100 Gs. So taking the acceleration in Gs as the readings, and then that some tests being, you know, continuously above 100 compared to water jets, we never got above 6 Gs, you know, in some of the panels. So now what we're doing is really just looking at you know, any potential substrate damage. And even right now, what we're doing with the ground penetrating radar is just really looking at differences in amplitude at different, I guess, at certain interfaces, you know, between materials within the liners, seeing what the differences are and what that could potentially mean. And it really could essentially push a great agenda into basically developing a future prototype system that would be applicable for field testing to basically take this a step further. Potentially looking at maybe getting a water jet system, you know, here at the Edgar mine, which is a great facility to use, or maybe even partner with a mine like the Henderson mine, which is a incredibly large underground operation that would definitely benefit from this type of research too. So that's essentially a quick overview of what I'm doing. But if you haven't, just go check out our presentations on the website as well. Any questions, I guess?
For those new to the call, you can just unmute yourselves, or you can write a question in the comment section, and
I would encourage you to check out the video. As Joseph has said, the visuals are great. It's they graphically illustrate the principles he just described. And as I was watching it last night, I kind of concluded I will never drive through the tunnels on Highway 6 or through the Eisenhower Tunnel again without wondering if that's been impact hammered for relining at any point in time. So it's a very interesting video if you get a chance.
And it's even to say too, I mean, a lot of the use of impact hammers themselves, I mean, you can have incredible operators who know how to use them really effectively and, you know, not lead to a lot of the problems that can occur. But that's definitely another key point too, is that a lot of this equipment use does come down to whether the operator knows how to use it well, and or if it's someone who's just maybe not as well trained. But yeah, definitely, yeah. definitely a great point.
Have you looked into applications like for highways, like particularly bridge decks, concrete bridge decks, and probably other other concrete structures could have applications?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, because that was a huge part of my literature search, was actually, when looking at the concept of, hydro excavation versus impact hammers such as jackhammers or anything like that. There is already a lot of great papers published by different departments of transportation in different states looking at this. A lot of companies, I guess a lot of states already have this equipment that does excavate bridge decks, concrete that deteriorates on bridge decks using hydro excavation. And they've compared it to impact hammers, and basically they've shown a lot of differences where, the impact hammers can lead to a lot of microfracturing within the substrate. So you're essentially causing damage that you can't see, and actually causing the structural integrity to deteriorate quicker than you anticipate, just based on the damage that happens without the operator knowing it. And so that's why a lot of people are trying to turn to hydro excavation, just because it's basically a rapid erosion process that doesn't cause that microfracturing that you see with impact hammers. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great documentation on that. And this research could, I guess, essentially help reiterate that stance that maybe this hydro excavation equipment is the better choice.
That's great. I encourage anybody that is in the civil area, take a look at the video again. It was well done, Joseph. Thank you for presenting that. And once again, we'll make sure that people have access to your information, can get to you if you're willing to answer the questions.
Yeah, feel free to reach out anytime.
So we're covering a lot of areas. I thought it was very interesting. Rosalee's was almost sociologic in nature. Joseph was very macro scale. I mean, probably can't get much bigger than impact hammers in 2-lane tunnels or whatever. Now we're going to get down to the microscopic level. And Gunn Hoon, PhD in chemistry, has a great presentation on, well, we'll let him describe it, okay? Thank you. Are you there?
Yep. All right, nice. Thanks for the invitation. Great presentations, guys. So my name is Gunn Han, and I work at a domain lab and chemistry department. Before I start anything, I took a look at the list of attendees, and I found out that most of you are engineers. So I'm going to keep it as least chemistry as possible. So my project was motivated by a kidney transplantation. It's the most commonly done transplant in the world. But the problem is, there's a lot of people that get this transplant. Right now, there's more than 100,000 people waiting for the transplant. The problem with the transplant is initially it has 95% success rate, but then in 10 years, about half those patients are losing their kidney due to organ failure. And so to figure out what the organ failure is, why the organ failure happens, physicians actually analyze the transplant with things like kidney biopsy or creatinine assay. But all those existing analysis techniques are either invasive to the organ itself, or it's not predictive in that it can't detect anything that's undamaged. So the goal of our research was to develop a predictive diagnostic tool that doesn't actually damage the kidney. Now, something that we saw as a handle to developing this material was an oxidative stress around a failing kidney. So anything that's recognized as an intruder or a damage the patient's body ramps up production of things like hydrogen peroxide that are intended to kill the intruders. But then if an excess amount of these species are produced, it also causes the damages to the patient themselves. So we took an approach of why don't we make a gel material that we can implant into the kidney that'll stay inside the kidney, but then degrade when the organ rejection starts. So we took a gel that from an earlier study from a different group that was used for neural stem cell transplant that seemed successful. And then we introduced a functional, we introduced a function into the gel by chemically anchoring some of the functional groups that will degrade in the presence of things like hydrogen peroxide. And so, hold on, I was gonna share the screen, but it seems like I can't do that. So we tested a bunch of formulations by differentiating the amounts of the constituents. So we made gels that are natively non-hydrolytically stable, so something that'll degrade over time. And then to that, we added these cross-linkers that'll degrade in the presence of excess hydrogen peroxide. So it makes the gel degrade only when it's affected by excess hydrogen peroxide that's produced by the patients. And then to the gel, we loaded a fluorescent dye. So when this gel degrades, and because it's inside a kidney, when the gel degrades, it gets taken up by the kidney and it gets excreted. So the patient's urine turns green, which is pretty unusual. So, and that's what we did. And this is something that can be used for a lot of different pathophysiological studies. So we're looking into kidney transplant, but then it can also be applied to things like autoimmune diseases, like asthma or arthritis, anything that has something to do with immune system, it can be applied. It can also be applied to cancer cells. There was a study published last year. It's an in vivo study with mice. And these guys loaded a gel with an anti-cancer drug that got released only around the cancer cells, and the cancer cells ended up being really, really small. So that was quite impressive. And yeah, and it can be linked to things like puzzling symptoms like a cytokine storm you might have heard from the COVID-19 crisis. Any immune system triggered symptoms, this logic can be applied. And am I cutting it too short? All right, I'll take any question.
I would just like to comment that what you're doing is no less engineering than what anybody else was doing here that presented. Engineering is simply defining a problem, looking for a solution, and then building that solution. Right. So whether this is being done in the realm of physiology or concrete, or in dealing with a cultural problem, it's all engineering. And so I'm just saying that so you don't diminish the value of what you're doing in this context of an engineering school. Okay.
No, we're actually trying to collaborate with the professor in chemical and biochemical engineering department. His name is Joe Samanek, and he does a lot of rheology stuff. And we can actually analyze our gels with rheological characteristics. So that would be a really cool route to take.
Once again, I don't want to dominate this.
I was going to ask a layman's question, and the question, Gunn, appreciate that. I think it's fascinating, and I admit I haven't read your paper yet. what's the purpose of the color change in the urine? Is that something that you specifically want to see, to notice that the delivery method has worked, or is that just a coincidence?
So it's an idea inspired by the hardship of analyzing the state of the kidney transplant. So right now there's kidney biopsy or serum creatinine assay, but for both of them you have to either go to a hospital or go to a testing lab. Now the biopsy can cost many thousands of dollars per biopsy. So it's really not that friendly of a way to see where the patient's transplant health is. And so if we develop something that lets patients know about their own kidney health, then it's a step forward in basically decreasing the cost of the transplant in general.
Yes, it's an indicator of the problem.
Yep.
If you look at watch his video, and it's actually a fluorescence that they have imparted into the chemistry, and that's what shows up as the color. If I stated that right, is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. It's a fluorescein, so it fluoresces green. Basically, it glows in the dark.
Does anybody else have any questions? Well, I'd like to just very gratefully thank, yeah, Daryl, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I've got a question. Have they talked with any medical doctors about the interest that the medical community would have on this?
Yeah, so my PI actually wrote a proposal with a medical researcher at Unyu. And the funding actually came through, and that's how we were able to do this. She focuses on the kidney transplant, and yeah, so it was actually her idea to make this material.
These presentations are a great expression of the diversity of capability and interest that comes out of minds. These were highly interesting to me. I assume that they are to everybody else that had the opportunity to see it. And I thank all three of you for your presentations and your work, and congratulations. Colleen, I really don't have any other comments. I want to thank everybody that chose to attend and your participation. From a lunch bunch standpoint, it looks like we're going to be reconstituting how this little event occurs in the future. I hope that as we go forward, we'll continue to have presentations such as this. Ruth and Colleen will be working very hard to make that happen. Thanks to all of you for participating. Colleen, would you like to close this out then?
Yeah, I'll just say some final words. Again, thank you to all of our presenters today. Thank you to Stu and Jason for also being on this call, and Stu for moderating it. Again, we will send out sort of a feedback survey to everyone on the call, along with everyone's video again and information. We also have a recording of this, so we'll share that as well. And we just really appreciate everyone participating. I thought this was really fun, so thank you.
Colleen, do you want to share who the next month's speaker is?
I'm going to let Ruth go ahead and do that. Ruth, do you want to go ahead and share that, and then we can wrap things up?
You bet. Hi, everybody. Our next gathering will be on June let me look at my calendar really quick, June the 18th. So mark your calendars, 12 noon. Our speaker will be Wendy Adams, and she oversees a program at Mines called Teach at Mines. So Teach at Mines. And this is a relatively new program, but a fast growing one that gives students the option to take classes, courses, and training and advising to train them to become teachers, right? This was born out of the physics department. And many of those professors have said, we need more people teaching physics. We need to promote teaching within the STEM field. So that will be the focus of the June program. So keep your eyes open for the website and the e-newsletter that will talk about how to RSVP for that. And unless we have another idea out there, this will be virtual, similar to today, so y'all can ask questions just as we've done. Yeah, so excited to have Wendy join us. We hope you'll join us too.
Thank you, Ruth, and be looking for a follow-up email from us with more information. I do want to say, just because of time, that's why we highlighted 3 graduate student research projects, but we did have 2 other students that were interested in participating. And I wanted to say thank you to David Goldberger and Raji Grande, and we will put their videos along with their contact information as well, and you can contact them offline. So thank you, everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and end the call. Have a nice day.
Adios.
Thank
Go
you.
Diggers, go Diggers.
Thank you.
Thank you.